In this chapter, we'll look at the effects of camera height. It's a common notion that placing the camera lower makes a character look big or superior, and placing the camera higher makes the character look small or inferior. That's generally true, at least when we're around eye level. Placing the camera much lower, we understand it as being low, so we don't perceive him as necessarily being big, but instead perceive it as a creative choice. Shooting down on characters, we understand our higher vantage point, so it doesn't make them look small. Instead, being higher up causes us to detach from the scene. In this angle, we're completely aloof. Let's look at a couple of important considerations when choosing a camera height. The first is that if the set doesn't have a ceiling, it's very easy to shoot off the edge of the set. If we planned a shot like this, but not asked for a ceiling, it's too late to put one in. Here, one solution is to shoot it where the ceiling is not an issue, maybe closer to a wall. We're looking at this because shooting upwards can produce problems that don't show up until the last minute, so we need to plan ahead. When we're outdoors, exposure is an issue. Shooting against the sky, which is much brighter, it's very hard to get good exposure on the character. If we expose for him, the sky burns out completely. If we put more light on him to balance the exposure, he can have trouble keeping his eyes open. Here we may want to shoot it in front of something less bright or something we can control, which of course is easier to find if we stay at eye level. Secondly, we need a reference to really know that we're high or low. Here we're above eye level. As we move to waist level, the perspective change on the man himself is unremarkable, and we're actually judging our height by the position of the far wall. As soon as we put in something to cause perspective lines, we get a much clearer idea of our height. Moving back to eye level, the perspective tells us much more than the elevation itself, so the more perspective we can create, the more we get out of choosing a height. Another way to bring in a reference is with foreground. As soon as we put the woman in the foreground, our height is 10 times as clear. As we move to around eye level, the thing to notice is that the man looks virtually the same, so we're getting our height from the foreground. Here we're at waist level. It's not until we're very low that the perspective on the man himself is noticeably different. Here the foreground and the leaning lines together create very powerful perspective. One last way to judge our height is by the horizon line if we have one. If we're looking up on her, the horizon line will be lower in the frame. If we're looking down on her, the horizon line will be higher. The effect of this is that when the horizon line is above the eye, she appears submersed or suppressed. When the horizon line is below the eye, she looks freer and more in command. In choosing a camera height, eye level is naturally most like reality. But it also produces very ordinary and documentary images, so that in itself can be reason to stay away from eye level. But if we're at eye level, we're also always tilting downwards. Here we're at pure eye level, but in order to put our eyes higher in the frame, we have to tilt down a little. So seen from the side, we're shooting downwards. In order to more naturally place our eyes higher in the frame, we should be lower and more level. So let's nudge a little under eye level. In this over the shoulder, we're again at eye level, angled downwards. But let's again center a little lower, placing us beneath eye level. The further we get away from the characters, the more we should gravitate towards waist level. Here again, eye level produces a very objective framing. Being lower relaxes the perspective, which creates a more filmic image and also makes more sense to a theater audience which is seated lower than the screen. Finally, it can be effective to adjust for the perspective lines that go from eye to eye and chin to chin. If we nudge a little lower, the perspective leads more elegantly from face to face. Staging upwards and downwards is really the same as staging with level characters, except that we need to make choices about camera height. We could just go ahead and shoot by the eye line as usual. This results in shooting hard down on one character and hard up on the other, which makes one character look superior and the other inferior. The completely neutral way of shooting this is to simply level each camera with the character. Leveling with the characters is more relaxed to look at and gives them equal power. But it puts us further away from the eye line and further outside the dialogue. The way to get a little bit of both is to place the camera halfway in between eye line and level. This lets us be part of the dialogue without having to do hard angles. Perhaps even more useful in close shots, it allows us to be fairly close to the eye line without making one character superior to the other. There's nothing that stops us from mixing heights. Here we're shooting hard up on the man, but we're level on the woman, so she seems relaxed and detached from the conversation, while he takes it more personally. Here we're shooting level on the man, but down on the woman and close to the eye line, so she's more directly affected, while he's more detached.